Thiessen and life coach Wendy Dillard here. Today is Thursday, January the 11th, 2018. This is your second daily dose of happy at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And the first dose was pretty good, so the second dose is going to be even better because that's the rule. The rule is always we have to get better and better and better. I mean, that's the whole point of doing this, so you can get your daily dose of happy and get happier and happier. And Wendy is the one. That's right. Wendy's the one who came up with the topic. As so often happens, she comes up with these really clever and creative topics. So I'm going to let her once again introduce the topic today.
Well, this was really fun because I've kind of had a lazy day where I just haven't felt like doing anything pretty much except sleeping. But if you remember last Friday, I said what was I going to do on my vacation? Sleep, 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 sleep.
Pretty much, yeah.
So I haven't done that much, so today's the day I'm catching up to it. So as I was thinking about today's show, like all day long I kept searching for a topic and nothing was really popping. And so just a few minutes ago before I called you, I said, okay, like last minute, is there a topic that I'm going to come up with today or is it Walt's turn? And I was getting this sense of just let the conversation take you wherever it takes you. And I went, well, how do I put that into a title? And so I started feeling this sense of deliberately experiment with law of attraction because law of attraction works 24/7 whether we're aware of it or not. And so I think how I put the topic together was activating the law of attraction deliberately.
Which is good. Yeah. It's also...
So what I'd like...
There should be like a subtitle to this because it's activating the law of attraction once every 17 seconds.
Well, and I'll kind of share that idea. One of the things Abraham talks about is how if you talk on a specific subject for 17 seconds, then the law of attraction, by nature of it being a law, that's all it's required is 17 seconds for another thought to be brought to you that matches that 17 seconds of conversation. And so then after you do 17 seconds and law of attraction brings you another like thought, then you talk another 17 seconds, which actually has become easier because by getting the new thought, it's kind of like it's actually the process of building momentum. Now you have 34 seconds, and because you've added that extra 17, law of attraction, again, by the nature of it being a law, will bring you another thought that will keep you going. And you do that 4 times. So 17 times 4 is 68. And what Abraham says is when you've reached 68 seconds of talking on one specific topic, you actually have activated physical manifestation.
In whatever form it is. Because who knows what it's going to be? It can manifest anything, right?
Well, depending on whatever we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And, you know, the important thing to note, what does manifestation look like, feel like, sound like, is, you know, manifestation starts in thoughts and feelings, but then when it starts moving into physical reality, that's when you start to see things, like all of a sudden you might be driving your car and you see a billboard, and the message on the billboard perhaps matches whatever you've been thinking about for the 68-plus seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Or somebody calls you on the phone, and that person or their conversation matches whatever you've been thinking about. And the idea is the more you are deliberate about focusing on a specific subject, the more you create the snowball effect, which Abraham calls the momentum.
Well, you know, as soon as you started talking about the 17 seconds about 2 minutes ago, I had something that came to my mind, and I really don't know why it's relevant, but since we're supposed to just go with it, I'll just go with it. There was a movie that came out a few years ago starring Matt Damon called We Bought a Zoo. I don't know if you ever saw it. But basically, it was a Hollywood version of a story that actually happened in England. They said it here in the U.S., but it actually happened in England. And literally, this father and his 2 kids end up buying a zoo and turning it around and turning it into this profitable thing and saving a whole bunch of animals who were otherwise destined for very unhappy fates. And it became a very famous project, so to speak, in England. Well, Matt Damon and company turned it into a film here. One of the themes that they play in that movie it shows up a number of times, but particularly at the end of the movie, is Matt Damon trying to teach his older son the value of 15 seconds of courage. And that's what made me think of the 17 seconds, the 15 seconds of courage. And in the movie, what happens is that it's a father and two kids. The wife died before the movie begins. And at the end of the movie, they're in a coffee shop, and Matt is explaining to his kids that this is where he met their mother for the first time. And he starts acting out how it went. And he's telling them that this is where they became a possibility. That's the way he worded it. So anyway, he says, I was walking down the street, and he holds up and he says, just wait a second. And he goes out the door, and he's outside the establishment there, looking in the windows, and he's yelling in. He's saying, okay, I'm walking down the street, and as I'm walking, I look over at that table over there, and I just stop because I just see the most beautiful woman I have ever seen in my life. And I said, well, what am I going to do? And so he says, he tells the story about how he decides to go in with just 15 seconds of courage and just do something to meet this woman, right? So he goes in the door, at the other door of the restaurant there, and the kids are watching him, and they're grinning and so forth. And he goes over to the chair where he was pointing to and says, okay, so now she's right there. She's in front of me. I still have some of my 15 seconds left. So I turned around to her, and I said, and he turns around as if she's sitting there, and he says, hi. And the camera pans to her sitting there in the chair. And everybody just stops, and the kids are looking like, oh my God, it's Mommy. And they're all smiling, and they're teary-eyed and so forth. And Matt points at her and looks at the kids like, see? And then he says, why would an amazing woman like you ever have anything at all to say to somebody like me? And she replies with her only line of the movie, why not?
Wow.
Now, what does that have to do with it? I'm not sure, but maybe it's the fact that she manifested right there out of thin air. Maybe that's what made me think of it, but it was a great connection.
It was. Well, and so me talking about 17 seconds connected to your getting a thought about 15 seconds. And I have to tell you, my intention for today's show is to just see where law of attraction takes us in conversation. But that story to me was very moving. I mean, like literally, it activated the tear ducts in my eyes.
Oh, yeah.
When you said, why not? It's like, that's so beautiful.
It is beautiful. It's a great ending to the movie, too.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
I will say that this deliberate activation thing I have used before, and I thought this might be fun just kind of as an exercise. I mean, we're going to do the experiment ourselves by doing this show, but I kind of wanted to offer an exercise or an experiment that listeners can do. It costs nothing. You don't have to enroll in a course, and you just try it and see how it works for you. But I'll tell you how I started using this.
Okay.
Is I'd have a subject in my life, and at the time, I will say it was a boss of mine who he and I just absolutely did not connect. We had very different personality styles, different communication styles. We both highly respected each other in our job and what we did.
Well, that's good.
But when it came to actually just talking, even though I had regular intervals where I had to talk to him, it's like I never looked forward to it because I never knew if I was going to hit a hot button and he was going to say something that would hurt my feelings. And it's like if I had something that I really needed to discuss with him and get him on my side, I never knew that he would. I didn't know if he would actually support me.
Yeah.
Because that's just how very different we were. And I recognized over time that he really represented the unresolved issues I had with my father.
Oh, really?
And totally. And it surprised me that it took me, like I've worked here with him for 8 years, and it took me about 4 years into our working relationship before I figured that out.
Wow. Well, it's good that you did it because a lot of people wouldn't figure that out at all. So that's you're doing really well to do that because that's a hard one for people.
Well, it got to be such a problem where each issue, if you will, just started snowballing and making it feel so much more difficult to work at my job because working with him was just so unpleasant and uncomfortable at times.
Wow.
I mean, sometimes it was quite lovely. I really never knew. It was just always who knows what you're going to get, which, by the way, that's what it was like with my father. I never knew if I was going to catch him in a good space or a bad space, if he was going to be critical and mean, or if he was going to laugh and joke and say, hey, come with me and let's go bike riding. I mean, I really never knew what to expect. So, which I suppose is totally appropriate for today's topic because I don't know what we're gonna do today.
That's right, yeah.
But anyway, back in this conversation where, I was recognizing that things were just really uncomfortable with my boss. And so I didn't know what to do. I was kind of at a loss, and I wanted to find a better way to feel about he and I working together. I was just really struggling to find a different viewpoint, because the only viewpoints I had were identical to the viewpoints I had with my father, which is he's erratic, I never know what to expect, he's very critical of me, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And that was easy to go down that road of thought because it was continually the evidence of what was real in my face. Mm-hmm. So in the middle of the day, because, like we know, I work from home, and so in the middle of the day I thought, you know what, I just really need to get away from my desk, and I'm going to go take a shower. So I did, and I don't know about you, but I always find being in the shower, the bath, when you're doing one of those personal hygiene things, that's kind of where you're focused on taking care of personal hygiene, and I often find that's when impulses and guidance pop in for me. So this particular day, I'm in the shower, and I thought, I want to get to the bottom of this, at least to find a good, positive viewpoint about my boss.
Okay.
And I just kind of learned about the 17 seconds thing. And so let's just try it. So, again, turn on the water, get in the shower. And I'm like, all right, let's see. Can I even find 17 seconds worth of conversation for me? And I did it in my head, and I went, okay, well, I know I really like my job. I know that this is the man that I interviewed with. And I remember having a really delightful conversation with him. As a matter of fact, it was the best interview I'd ever had in my entire career.
Wow.
And that's what made me just have the feeling, oh, my God, I want to work for this company and I want to work for this man. This is so good. And during our interview, he was like in awe of me, which I was like, I love that. No one has ever acted like they were in awe of my talents or my skills before. But everything I said, he just was like enamored by. And I'm like, ooh, this is really cool. And so I kept thinking about this and just, kind of running this in my mind. And before I knew it, I didn't have a stopwatch with me in the shower, but I realized I was starting to gain momentum. And I was probably in the shower for a full 10 minutes or so. And I was aware that I had one thought after another pop in about him and positive things that he had done. And I remembered in my first year, I had prepared this event that he had requested of me, and he bought me a bouquet of flowers that he presented in front of my whole team, just saying these wonderful things about how fabulous I was. I'm like, oh, my God, this is so cool. And I did another event for him, and, our whole team, again, we're out at dinner, and he stood, and he had everybody toast their glasses to me, all because of his appreciation. Now, I got to tell you, before I got in the shower, I had forgotten about this stuff.
Sure.
I'd totally forgotten. But because I took this challenge to just come up with 17 seconds worth of thinking about him in a positive way, it's like law of attraction just kept bringing to me another memory and another memory and another memory. And then I'd see his face, and I'd see where he was speaking to me with such sweetness and kindness. And I'm like, I'd forgotten about this stuff.
It's astonishing, too. When we get into, I'm sorry to interrupt your story, but I just got to mention, it's astonishing how easy it is for us to forget this stuff, to forget that the good stuff happens, especially if we're focused on something that, like you were saying, you're never really sure how he's going to react, and you start focusing on that, it completely blocks out the other stuff in our mind. That's a normal thing. That happens to everybody. It happens to me about twice daily. I mean, it's just incredible how it happens, but it does happen, and that's what makes what you're doing here so powerful. So sorry, I interrupted the story, but I just had to get that in there.
Okay. Well, and so by the time I got out of the shower, I was really in shock I mean, truly, I was in shock because I didn't think I could even find 17 seconds worth of stuff to say about him that wasn't critical.
Right, let alone
but
10
I
minutes.
was deliberate about, I'm working toward finding a better viewpoint about him because I want to feel good about working with him. And I got to tell you, by the time I went back to my desk, I was in a very different place. I felt really positive about him. Now, it didn't mean that we never had another problem, but my intention at that time was to experiment, like we are today, with the law of attraction. Can the law of attraction really help bring me some positive thoughts about him because I was at a stalemate within my own thought process? Because at that moment, I hated him. I didn't like him. I didn't want to work for him. I felt he was mean and cruel and critical, just like my father had been, and I wanted out. And I knew that was not the thought process that was going to help me get through that day's work, let alone the rest of the week or the month. And I'm like, I've got to find a better way to think on this in order to feel better so I can do my job without this nagging in the back of my head.
Yeah. Well, kudos to you for even noticing that, because there are a lot of people who would not recognize that they needed to get into that better mind space. In fact, that's something that in the books I've been reading most recently, Abraham really has been emphasizing how important it is to get into that really good feeling place before you try to do anything. And that's exactly what you tried to do.
That's what I did. And so because that experiment had been so successful for me, I started using it more often. Like whenever I found myself at a dead end in my own thought process where I just couldn't get to the thoughts that I wanted to get to, where, the better feeling thoughts, I would just say, Wendy, you can do 17 seconds. That's all you have to do. Can you come up with, like you said in the movie, 15 seconds of courage?
Right.
This was, can you come up with 17 seconds, even if you totally don't believe in it, just 17 seconds of words or inner dialogue to start the ball rolling, because law of attraction, by law, will jump in and provide another thought.
And it's true. That's really what happens, because when you try it, it's like you've overcome the inertia and, just, like you said, started the ball rolling. And after just a little bit of time, 17 seconds apparently, according to Abraham, it starts to get easier. Even though a moment ago it seemed impossible, it now starts to get easier. And like you say, it seems to get easier and easier. And it happens quickly. I mean, the first 17 seconds are the tough ones. After that, it just it's like the gears got lubricated or something. That's almost the way it feels. Like you're not pushing hard.
I love that. That's a great visual for me, that the gears got lubricated.
Yeah.
Because I could see it kind of gliding with ease.
It's like the Tin Man from the Wizard of Oz. He gets some oil into the joints. He can actually move around. He can start, moving his elbow and stuff. It just gets easier and easier.
Well, and whenever you're at a point, whether I'm at a point, you're at a point, or our listeners are at a point where you just feel like you can't get movement in an area in your life, this to me is a perfect something to try, and you can do it by yourself, or if you happen to be with a friend who's like-minded and is willing to support you in whatever positive intent you want to do. Sometimes it's more fun and easier to do it with a friend because you're looking in someone's eyes and you're like actually kind of talking to them about something. You can start with, here's where I'm at, and I'm really wanting to spin this in a positive direction because I don't really know how to get there on my own, but I know it's possible, and I know law of attraction wants to work with me, and law of attraction is always working, and I want to see law of attraction working on my behalf. And before you know it, you start to get new thoughts. And here's the part that I think is really cool, is if you have trained yourself to pay attention to that feeling when you know that thought just popped in from law of attraction versus it was just part of the conversation that was left over of you manually trying to produce it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember when I was in the shower that day, I went back and I started thinking, all of a sudden such and such thought popped in, and I knew that wasn't me because I wasn't thinking about that at all, but all of a sudden I had an image, like of the bouquet of flowers. I had this image of him presenting these flowers, and I knew that was law of attraction handing that thought to me because that was one I hadn't thought about in years.
Okay.
I was
all
like,
right.
that's really cool. And then when I told you about the other one where we were at the dinner table and he asked everyone to, do a toast to me, I knew law of attraction had brought that thought to me, that memory, because that was not something I'd thought about in years either.
Wow.
But it, just like popped in.
Yeah. And it's something that you probably should think of more often, because those are pretty good events. I mean, those were seminal, really, in terms of your working relationship with him. So to have them come along, that's probably something you should try to implement a little more often. When you think about it. So it's a good thing that it came up, because not only did it help you get through the day, it gave you some fodder going forward. Here's some stuff you can actually work with and make your life better and make it get yourself back into that high flying place a lot more often throughout the day. Just give yourself a great tool. That's fantastic.
And I will say, because the nature of his and my relationship, even when we were being cordial with one another, we still really weren't a great match because we had so many things that just were not in common. And as I became aware of like another area where we'd have this might have been weeks later, all of a sudden there was another point where I felt like, he was being critical. I would take that critical issue and off office time, I would just work on it and figure out, this is just like when my dad did this to me in the 3rd grade and blah, blah, blah. And so I realized it was an unfinished or unresolved issue that I had with my father.
Uh-huh.
I didn't call my dad up to work on it. I worked on it in my own mind and thought, how was I taking, because when you're a kid, you don't think like an adult. And so it's much easier to misperceive the meaning behind the action.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I kind of got clear on, my dad was being critical, but he wasn't being critical because he was trying to be mean. That was the only way he knew how to communicate. And, and I'm just thinking about one particular situation. His intention was really to say, I'm proud of you. He just didn't have those words available to him because that's not what was modeled to him by his parents. Because they were critical. And so what I said to myself as an adult is, my dad's intention was to say, Wendy, I'm proud of you. Well done. And in that moment, and this doesn't happen for everybody, and but in that moment for me, I felt very different about that situation with my dad. I went, he was really proud of me. I didn't recognize that when I was 8 years old. But you know what? He was proud of me. And I can see, all of a sudden then I was able to see other events in my life where he was proud of me. He just didn't have the words to say, I'm proud of you. And so what was interesting is then when I thought about my boss and the situation that had happened that afternoon where I felt he had been critical of me, all of a sudden it didn't have any negative charge anymore.
It
felt very neutral to me, like, okay, no big deal.
Yeah, that's a major change right there. The fact that it had no real sting to it anymore. You just basically diffused an old tape.
That's right. And when that happens and it's truly diffused, it means the next time that a situation like that occurs, well, actually one of two things occurs. Either it will no longer happen, like I wouldn't bring that out in him, or in my case, because his personality was the same and it didn't change, he was still critical, but when he said something that I would have called critical in the past, it didn't hurt my feelings anymore. As a matter of fact, I knew I could get off the phone and call a girlfriend and laugh. Go, you're so not going to believe this. He said the same things that he said to me in the past that used to just put me into like a the fetal position where I just wanted to go into tears of pain because I felt like he had just so maligned me. And I said, now it just made me laugh. I was like, yep, there are those same words again, but it's not bothering me at all.
That's terrific. What a transition. Oh.
And I mean, he was actually one of the greatest gifts in my life because through my relationship with him, I had the opportunity to process these unresolved issues that I had with my father. And there came a point when I knew in my heart I'd processed everything that was necessary. I didn't have any more negative angst against my father in anything I could think of. And so I'm like, oh, well, my boss's job has now been fulfilled. And so I went, well, one of a couple things will happen. We will part company. Well, one, I knew we would part company. That to me was a foregone conclusion because I had no more resistance toward him, and there was nothing that he could do or say to me anymore that would cause any kind of negative response. I had a neutral charge on everything or a positive charge.
That's really strong.
So I told one of my friends, I said, here's what's going to happen. In a short order, he will either leave the company or he'll find a new job within the company, or I will leave the company, or I'll find a new job within the company. And 6 months later, after I said that, they reorganized my whole business unit, and he was asked to move either out of the company or find another role in the company.
Mm-hmm. So, once again, law of attraction came through, delivered exactly what you were thinking about, mainly because you were also feeling about it, and you were doing it in a big way. And this is the part that I recognize the most. You were doing precisely what Abraham says to do. You were doing everything you could to get yourself out of an old pattern and retelling the story in a new way. And I have to admit, the first time that I heard that concept, retelling the old story of what happened in a new way, it seemed impossible to me. It didn't seem like that was something that you could really do. I mean, if you did, you were just telling a lie. Well, deep in the back of your head, you knew, oh, well, that's not really what happened.
I mean, I recognized, even though my boss was a different man and a different upbringing than my father, I recognized that when my boss was continued to be critical, that was because from his religious indoctrination that he was a part of, that criticalness was actually to help to make you a better person. Mm-hmm. That it wasn't meant to like malign me or make me feel bad. He was actually trying to help improve who I am and my behavior according to his viewpoint, so I could be a more productive employee.
So ultimately, you found a way to make peace with that, and that's really what the accomplishment is. You made peace with it.
I did, and even though I disagreed with how he went about it, I saw it from a viewpoint of he's really trying to be helpful and kind to me. It's just that I'm not receiving it that way. I'm receiving it like who I am and how I do things in my viewpoint was totally acceptable. And he didn't see that, and that's why he continued to try to say things that in the past I thought were critical, and now I didn't see it that way. And it's like, okay, thank you for your kindness. It's really how I started to see it. And that, I got to tell you, was a very different feeling than the years that I spent with him wanting to go into a fetal position and cry.
Oh, yeah.
Same words, totally different reaction.
Yeah, 100% different reaction. I mean, almost no similarity at all, other than the fact that it was the same source. That was about it.
Exactly. So now, in the meantime, we have talked about this before, that whenever you experience something unpleasant, which Abraham calls, where you're experiencing contrast, mm-hmm. you're in the step of asking. Because what you're asking for, even if you don't know it consciously, there is always an ask for what you preferred instead of this thing that you're experiencing that feels so uncomfortable. So my preference was to work for somebody who was kind and was able to verbalize the kindness or in some way somehow show me that he thought that what I was doing was valuable and was making a difference. Because with my boss, I could never tell. Just like with my dad, I could never tell if he liked me or didn't like me. And what was so fascinating is on the day that the new boss arrives, we have this telephone conversation, and he's introducing himself to me. And I'm listening to these words, and he said, you know what, it's all about the people. He goes, it's the people that make the company thrive. And he goes, I'm all about the people and all about the connections. And then he said, and if we're not having fun, there's no point in doing it.
Ooh, nice.
Whoa. This is a totally different kind of philosophy than my last boss, which is all about, you just do these things. It's very strategic or, tactical. You have to follow step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this new boss is all about the people make the difference. Now, granted, he's still very strategic, but he cares about the people.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, my friends at work would call me up because they had just heard, oh, my God, I had a change in boss. And, we all know it's not like you got a choice. Which boss do you want? Boom, here's your new boss. And being an executive administrator, it's my job to help support this new boss.
Mm-hmm.
And so I work very closely with him. And my friends are like, so how are you handling the change? And my words were, I said, it's like I can finally take off the orange jumpsuit.
Yeah.
I mean, I truly felt like the prison doors had been opened wide, and I got to walk out of prison. Oh, my God, what a fabulous feeling that was.
So I guess the answer to the question is you're getting along with him pretty well.
I get along with him pretty well. But it's funny because how he's touchy-feely is in a group environment. He writes the most beautiful emails of appreciation for individuals, and he does it with a witty sense of humor that literally, and I mean literally, has me laughing out loud sometimes for 5 minutes because it's so incredibly funny. But I remember he said, if it's not fun, why bother? And so he keeps the fun going. And even when I'm having just tedious moments, because that can happen from time to time when you're doing a job, it's like I think about him and what would he think if I told him what I was going through? He'd probably find a way to crack a joke.
Which is very cool. I have to apologize to you, Wendy, believe it or not. I have to apologize to you because I accidentally knocked us both offline for about 15 seconds. So we lost part of that story, I'm embarrassed to say. But we caught a good portion of it. So we know the gist of the story. We just missed some of the details. So I'm sorry about that.
Well, the gist of the story is that the new boss that I got is fun to be with. And even though being that he's British and he doesn't always, connect with me on a, wow, Wendy, you are doing great level, he says that in emails that go out to our whole team of 80 people. And he says it to a broad audience. The way he'll say it is something like, and I know everyone can appreciate Wendy for all that she brings to us because there's probably not one of you that hasn't had been saved by what she has to offer.
Oh, that's nice.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's even kinder and even better when he says it to 80 people instead of him just saying it to me where nobody knows that that's what he's really thinking.
It probably depends on the personality. I think in your case, it does make a huge difference. For somebody who's more introverted than you are, that might not necessarily be better, although I can't see how it would be really bad because anybody likes to be praised. But you're definitely not an introvert, so I think it works really well for you.
Yeah. So, it's like not only did I get to take off the orange prison jumpsuit, but I've gotten to work with somebody that, if I have a personal thing going on, I can say it to him. If I have an issue going on with something or somebody at work, I can talk to him about it and not feel what I used to feel, which is he going to jump all over me? Or is he going to take this in a way that, like, I'm going to end up feeling bad and I wish I never opened my mouth? So the reason I'm sharing this part of it is because the whole time for 8 years that I was experiencing what I didn't like with my previous boss, I had been unconsciously requesting what I did want. And the universe knew what I did want. So when it was time for a change of bosses, what I did want is who I got.
Isn't that interesting? I mean, we are all, as human beings, especially after we hear about the law of attraction, we are all focused on ask, 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 ask. And here's a case where quite clearly you didn't really have any particular ask that you'd put out there consciously. Just you'd done it through, just being you and experiencing it the way you experienced it and wanting what you wanted without actually putting it into words, so to speak. And yet the universe still picked up on it, which once again reinforces what Abraham tells us. Asking isn't the hard part. It's the allowing that we really need to focus on. And the allowing, of course, comes from being in the happy place. And each one of these little story segments that you're telling are stories about how you got into a happy place. And when you got into that happy place, all the good things started to happen, which totally reinforces everything we talk about every show. It proves it. Mm-hmm. When you get into that happy place, when you stay in that happy place, amazing things happen. Mind-blowing things happen. It's great.
Well, and what I find really fascinating is how, especially when individuals start to hear the phrase law of attraction, or for the first time they know that there is such thing as a law of attraction, and I'll hear phrases like, oh, I want to use the law of attraction. Well, I kind of think that's a cute phrase. I don't know how accurate it is, because law of attraction has been always in operation. Mm. It's just because an individual all of a sudden becomes aware that it exists doesn't mean, as of now, it's finally starting to work in somebody's life. It's like, no, it's always been doing it. And my illustration of my scenario with my boss, I don't know how much time I really spent saying, here's what I really wish I could have in a boss, but every single time I experienced something unpleasant, I love knowing that the universe was cataloging, and the preference is, because like when I would experience where I thought I was going to say something that my boss would go, oh, yeah, that's a great idea, and instead he jumped down my throat, and I went, oh, crap, I wish I wouldn't have said that. Mm. In that moment, I'll make this up, but in that moment, most likely what the preference was is that I could feel a sense of certainty that when I spoke to him, he would treat me with kindness, and I would feel good about having shared something with him. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't make a mental note like, hey, universe, by the way, when we get a new boss, I want to make sure that this following characteristic is inherent in the new guy. Law of attraction catalogs that.
Of course, in order for for the universe to catalog that, it has to have a consistent signal from you. And it has to be a consistent signal in favor of what you want instead. You had to be giving that in some way, otherwise it couldn't possibly respond to it.
It's an interesting point. I've never thought about it in that way, that it has to be a consistent something.
Yeah, I mean, if it isn't a consistent signal, then you're basically countermanding it or contradicting it, or however you want to say it. But I mean, that's what we do so often, right? We contradict our own signals. Yeah, I'm going to make $1 million. Yeah, that's not going to happen. And there, bang, we just contradicted ourselves.
Yeah. Well, I do know that we can have a thought of what we want, and then over time we can refine it and change it and adjust it, or even change it altogether. Mm-hmm. So in terms of, being consistent, I think the law of attraction, the universe, I like to also call it the universal manager, is noting what we want, and somehow it works. I mean, obviously, I don't know all the answers. I don't think any one person possibly could.
No.
I think one of the best ways to know how it works is by doing what do you call it on a forensic show? A postmortem, where you look at something after the fact, and then you kind of follow the breadcrumbs by doing a reverse engineering to see, okay, what really happened. And so I was able to tell you the story of my old boss and my new boss based on, here's where I am now, and now when I look back, here's all the things that led up to it. Sometimes that's the best way for an individual to actually understand how law of attraction impacts their life personally.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I know for myself, my own approach to the law of attraction is what many coaches would call foolhardy, because I'm the one who wants to understand how it all works. I think almost every other co-host I have does not take that position. Every one of you would rather just, put it out there and go and don't spend any time on it. And for me, I want to know all the intricate little details of it, sometimes to my detriment, which is not a good thing. But on the other hand, though,
20 years ago.
Oh, okay.
20 years ago, I didn't want to use something unless I knew how it worked.
Oh, okay. All right. So then you can certainly identify with it, at least on some level. So that's good.
Because once I understood how it worked, I'm like, okay, now I can let go of all the moving parts and just go with it.
Yeah. So anyway, the reason I was mentioning that is recently I was thinking about how would I model the average day in the life of a person showing all of the law of attraction in action. I'm like, if you could take the vortex and turn it into a physical image, and you have that spinning and all the stuff flowing around in it, and then you have all the thoughts going out there, and you got them all, labeled with little spinning, vibrating things, and so this was vibrating at this speed, and this was vibrating at that speed, and as I start to put that image in my mind, and to the degree that I can, I'm not a good visualizer. For me, it was more abstract, but as I tried to piece that together, I realized you end up with a lot of stuff bouncing all over the place and colliding and interacting and flying through and all. It's like, because there's so many things that we're thinking about and doing and looking at and interacting with and talking about throughout the day. I mean, if everything that we thought about had a physical vortex to it or a physical spin to it or something like that to show the vibration, it would be a very crowded universe. I mean, it would be really, really crowded with all this stuff interacting all over the place. So the fact that we actually get to the point where we do achieve a certain degree of consistency, and that's why I was mentioning what I was about your story before. You did achieve a consistent vibration. When you do that, it's noteworthy. It's noteworthy within that confluence of all these events, because all of a sudden a whole bunch of stuff starts vibrating very much the same way. It's almost like it's a dance going on with all that stuff that has a similar vibration. I really think that's a model of how it happens.
I do like, how you described it. I do like how you did, because it gave me some mental images of, I wonder if that would be fun just to create for illustrative purposes, something where there was a drawing that showed all of these things, like take one person's thoughts even for 1 hour and have like little thought bubbles.
Yeah, right. Like in the cartoon strips.
And then you'd have like I was seeing an image of like a tornado, a tornado funnel above that thought bubble, and then all of the things that law of attraction did with that thought, and started to arrange all the components to orchestrate manifestation for that person.
Yeah.
That could be quite an interesting visual.
It's a challenge for a graphic artist who likes to do 3D video. I mean, that one would be like a major project. That would probably win you a PhD somewhere.
Well, but even if we started with a two-dimensional drawing, that would be very interesting. I don't know. Maybe that's something you and I can work on creating together, because that would be, you're a graphic artist, and I can kind of see it because I'm pretty visual. So who knows? Maybe we could do that.
Well, it's always possible. I have to say my own graphic design days are pretty much behind me. It's not something I want to pursue a lot. I was thinking maybe the hypothetical artist out there. I don't really want to do it myself.
Not a problem. Well, then maybe you threw it out there, and I'll take the challenge, because I know some people who are graphic artists that could probably make that happen.
It's gotten so bad, to be honest, that if I try to sit down to design something, I come up with something that looks like a third grader come up with it, because I just have no more patience for it anymore. It's crazy. But
wow. Oh, and by the way, I just want to mention this to you, because I think it's ironic. I've heard you say so many times you're just not visual. I feel pretty confident that you are not aware of how many things you say that are visually minded.
Oh, actually, I am aware of them, believe it or not. Believe it or not, I am aware of them. I say that because whenever I'm saying that, it's because I've been reaching for what a particular visual image looks like, and I draw a blank. And that's why I say that, because I can't actually create the image. I can structure it. I can abstractly structure it in my mind, doing a schematic or something like that. But I can't create the image in my mind. Certainly not the way I can create sound in my mind. I can create an entire orchestra in my mind. I can create entire conversations in my mind. But I can't do the same thing with objects. So I
wonder. But it leaves me wondering how it is serving you to say over and over, I'm just not visual.
Well,
and I don't
clearly it's not. I just keep saying it.
Because I kind of get the impression you would like to have a greater ability to visualize the imaginations that you think up.
This is true. So I'm basically shooting myself in the foot every time I say that. It's not the best approach. So let's see, how do I turn it around?
Editing. That might be a phrase that you want to edit from your current vocabulary.
So let's see, how do I turn it around? You know what it is? I need to have some something in my back pocket that I can pull out whenever I have that blank, where I have no way to fill it in, and I'm not sure how to fill that in. How do I say, well, I'm drawing a blank? Maybe I just say I'm drawing a blank. I'm not sure how to do it.
Say, it's not coming to me at the moment. I'm
that's
sure
good.
it will.
That's
but here's
good.
what I have at this point.
That's good. Okay, yeah, that helps. It's not coming to me at the moment.
Of course,
I'll be saying that a lot, but
you
still.
hear me do that with. So you hear me do that with words.
True.
Like I'll be looking for a word, and I can kind of almost see it in my head, and I know it begins with the letter R or something like that, but I'm just not having an easy time finding it. But I will say things like, what's that word? I'm looking for this word. And eventually a word pops into my head. Mm-hmm. But I purposely set myself up for the success of finding that which I'm seeking.
And you're giving yourself a little time, too, by saying, let's see, what's that word?
Yeah,
what is that word? And,
Yeah, and I'm not embarrassed that, like, I'm on the radio and people are listening while I'm seeking for a word, because if nothing else, I'm modeling to them, you know what, there's no shame in the fact that you can't find a word in the very moment that you're hoping to find it. And here's what it looks like when I'm trying to find a word. I say, okay, I know it's there. What is it? Okay, it's coming to me. Because with an R, boom, there it is. So I use it as a teaching point.
Okay. I'm not sure that I'm there yet, but I'll file that away. Let's put it that way. I will file that away. I will say, okay, that's keep that one in the subconscious mind. It's a good one.
Actually, you might want to put it in your conscious mind.
Well, one step at a time, okay?
Well, if the reason I say you are conscious right now while we're talking, I don't know that you can put it in your unconscious mind. Your unconscious mind is the one who has to play with that storage problem.
Oh, actually, I think you can. I really believe you can. In fact, how many teachers have told us? Tony Robbins, for instance, was telling us you could program your subconscious mind many, many years ago. And how many of the more modern people have been telling you can program your subconscious mind? Deepak Chopra, he's all about reprogramming your subconscious mind. And so it's a very common phenomenon. And the fact is that it's a good thing to do, I think anyway. I ran into an example of it, and I can't remember if I told you or if I told one of the other co-hosts about it this week. But I ran into an example this week because with the book project that we're working on and that I'm trying to find more and more co-authors for. And we're making good progress, by the way. I think we're up to 19 or 20, so we're making good progress. But in the course of pursuing that, I found myself kind of struggling because, the struggle wasn't in the results I was getting. Every time that I put out a message to somebody, and I was doing a lot of it with emails, so I'd find somebody, send them an email because I found their email address on the website or something like that. And whenever I got replies back, almost universally, the results were really nice. Thanks for thinking of me. That's a great idea. Blah, 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 blah. All these very positive things. I had one person who's turned it down so far out of, I don't know how many people have responded. And that one person turned me down very politely. It was not painful at all. And yet the tapes in my mind were saying the next time an email comes, it's going to be a complaint that they were being spammed, or it's going to be a complaint that this is completely unrelated to what they do with their practice. Or, I was inventing all these crazy things. So I know that the subconscious mind was feeding that to me. I know that it was feeding me the stuff that was really not true. It was an old tape. It had nothing to do with what was going on with the actual project itself. And that was an opportunity, and that was a reminder to myself, okay, there's a tape. I want to erase it. I want to replace it with something better. And toward that end, I actually stopped and said, stop it. All of these emails are good. Everything that's happening here is good. Let's feel good about this. And I've been trying to do that ever since then, just to erase that particular tape. And it's beginning to work now, because actually in the last day or two, the emails, as they've been coming in, I don't have that charge attached to it anymore. And I can open it now and kind of expect there's going to be something good there. And then there is.
So that kind of opens up a slightly other topic that I'll just touch on for a moment, which has to do with unconscious versus conscious.
Okay.
My original teacher of this kind of thing was Tony Robbins. For a good number of years, I was steeped in what he taught. I attended 11 live seminars. I listened to.
You went to 11 Tony Robbins seminars? Oh my goodness!
11. I've spent a lot of money doing his stuff.
Yeah, his stuff's not cheap either. Wow.
And so, I mean, he talked about the unconscious mind, and because I knew his background was in NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, that's why I eventually took that course, and I, graduated with that one and then took the advanced level, and so, I'm a master practitioner, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, both that course, the NLP course, and Tony Robbins talk a lot about the unconscious mind. So that was just kind of the wording that I used often. And what I found really fascinating is many other people at Abraham Hicks workshops would sit in the hot seat and they talk about their unconscious mind. And they kind of blame things on, well, but it's all unconscious. And I started hearing Abraham do a little bit of a correction, if you will. And they said, if you're thinking about it and you can talk about it, it's not unconscious. And I went, whoa,
this is
true. A newsflash to me.
Yep.
And they said, if it's going on in your life and you are actually, like, if the law of attraction is matching you up with stuff, then it's active in your vibration.
Yes, that's true.
They said, if it's unconscious, it's as though the switch has been flipped off and it's not matching with anything. So if you have something matching you and law of attraction is bringing experiences you don't like, what they said is that's not unconscious. Now, you might be unaware of it, but it's actively playing out in your vibrational being. And that kind of flipped a switch for me, and it caused me to think about things different because the thought of something being unconscious, at least for me, gave me the impression it was not touchable or reachable by me. I like thinking about things as being conscious because conscious things are in closer proximity to what I can touch and play with and kind of remold the clay, if you will. So I just wanted to throw that out. It's just a concept. I don't know if you'd heard that or not, but that's one that I'm kind of liking.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense, and I think it actually dovetails because if you're focusing on what you are experiencing consciously and you are deliberately working with it to your benefit, you're still reprogramming your subconscious mind. Doesn't really make any difference because you're getting both benefits. You're getting the benefit of treating it as conscious and you're getting the reprogramming benefit. You're getting both. It's a good thing.
Well, and like using the illustration of when I was working with my previous boss and he would say something that would trigger a response that I had really to something that was going on with my dad from when I was a child. I didn't always know what that thing was, but it was very clearly active in my vibration because I kept having it reoccur and reoccur and reoccur. So that's where I had to do a little bit of I had some patience, but, I'd say, okay, universe, I want to know what it is that obviously is active, but I don't know what it's about or what the circumstances were. And you don't always have to know the source event, what really happened when you were a kid, but sometimes it helps. But it's like I needed more information in order to find out what was active because it was kind of hidden from my awareness.
Okay. It's feeding into my conscious mind and making me go to something that I just started to explore 2 days ago, or was it yesterday? I can't remember which for sure. I was considering a passage that appears in the Pam Grout book that Cindy Chavez gave me, the E Squared book. In that book, she cites a couple of statistics, and I don't see sources for it. So one of these days, I'm going to send her an email and say, so where did you exactly look this up? Because I want to look it up. But she says, according to scientists, our five senses absorb 400 billion bits of information per second. However, we can only process 2,000 bits per second. So we're processing about 1/2 of 1/millionth of 1% of all the stuff that our senses are able to take in. And I've been thinking about that, and I've been wondering about it, because that's a pretty big gap. There's a whole lot of stuff there that we're not consciously dealing with, according to those statistics. Even if they're exaggerated and it's still a big gap, that's enough for me. That's like, okay, I need to pay attention. There's something going on here. And I just played with it and played with it and played with it. One thing I realized is that the people who we describe as autistic are the ones whose filters are missing, and they're the ones who have trouble processing those 400 billion bits. We have these filters in place so that we can only essentially see, so to speak, 2,000 of them. The autistic person doesn't have that, and that's why they are autistic. And I base that on what Temple Grandin has said in her film. That was a film based on her life and what it's like to be autistic. Okay, so clearly then there are circumstances, not necessarily great, where people can in some way be dealing with these huge amounts of data coming through. And that led me to more contemplation, more exploration, and then I said to myself, Abraham talks about expansion. I wonder if one of the things that expands is our ability to process data. And so turning that around, I asked myself, say, arbitrarily picking a number, 200 years ago, 500 years ago, whatever. I wonder if you could measure it, if you were to find that people living a number of hundred years ago could only process, say, 500 bits of data or 1,000 bits of data, and that over time, our species has expanded its ability to handle data so that now we're up to 2,000. And if that's the case, then what that's really projecting is the idea that we are able over time to expand our ability to handle the data. And as we expand our ability to handle the data, we're going to have so much more to work with in terms of data. And that's just going to continue to fuel the explosion of information and the explosion of discoveries and so forth that just keep happening day after day, week after week, year after year.
Have you ever read or heard of the Seth books?
I've heard of them. I have only read pieces of them. I don't really know them as a whole.
So I like to think of them, they're kind of like a precursor to Abraham.
Yeah.
Because a woman named Jane Roberts, she was receiving the non-physical consciousness that referred to himself as Seth.
In fact, Jerry and Esther talk about in their story about how they tried to go meet Jane Roberts and found out that she had died before they'd even had a chance to meet her, and they were disappointed. Yeah. So, yeah, that's part of their story.
And so Jerry had been reading Seth books. So anyway, a couple years ago, I started to feel led like, okay, I want to start learning some stuff that Seth has talked about, and I've read a number of the books, and one of them really talks about what you just said about an expanded consciousness, because it's something like it had never occurred to me, where Seth was saying, over the course of humanity, our conscious mind has been adjusted. Like there used to be a much more limited consciousness available to us. I'm going to just throw around some words that I don't even know now what it all means, but it was kind of like our ego was not a part of the consciousness when man was originally created. But then the ego kind of was added to consciousness, and then the ego has grown, and different parts of our consciousness have developed. And so it just kind of threw out there for me a whole new awareness of the consciousness that you and I live with today was not always what was available to man in an earlier time.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, it stands to reason, like you're talking about, as man continues to evolve and grow, our consciousness will expand to something beyond where we are today.
And for me, it gives a meaning to the idea of consciousness expanding. If I just say consciousness expanding, it seems to kind of fall flat because it doesn't tell me a whole lot. But when I start adding in things like being able to process more data, then it gives it a little bit more flavor and a little bit more texture and so forth. So I think that's why I explore that. But yeah, we're actually down to our last minute, believe it or not.
I know, and I'm looking at the clock. But I mean, now for an experiment that we didn't really have a topic, but our topic was to just see where it went.
Yeah.
I feel like this is a very rich, full. I never was lacking for something to think about. How about you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was not in the sense of what our normal topics are, where we keep bringing it back to the same topic because there wasn't something particular to bring it back to other than this is an experiment. But we did cover some really fascinating stuff. And I think part of it for me was we actually got to explore that little last bit there. I've been thinking about that recently and saying, well, Jesus, there's some way I can incorporate that into a show, and I couldn't think of a way to do it. Well, You gave me a way to do it, which is very cool. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. All right, so do your last spiel. Do what you do.
We actually have one little piece of business that we need to take care of. You were doing a terrific little experiment. I have to admit, I have an iPhone. I'm an iPhone user. I don't use an Android. And you were testing out how the Spreaker software, the live player software works on an Android, and you were also testing out how it is to connect to the playlist, to basically subscribe to the show. And you pointed out to me that what I've been saying on the air is not accurate. So first of all, I want to apologize to everybody who's an Android user who've been trying and failing to subscribe to the show. And secondly, I want to give you a clue how to do it. And it turns out it's not all that difficult. Just modify what I've been telling you. When you go to the Google Play Store, first of all, it's just called Play Store. It's not called the Google Play Store. So if you can't find Google Play Store, that's why. Go to the Play Store and do a search. Don't search immediately on LOA Today. Search on something called the Podcast Manager. It's a little app that allows you to play podcasts. And when you download that, that will enable you to find the LOA Today. Did I tell that right, Wendy?
Yes. That's it.
Okay.
At least that's how I found it. And so I have found our show on multiple podcast apps. So you don't even have to say Podcast Manager. Just put in podcast, and multiple things will come up, and you can just look through them and pick the one that you like.
So hopefully you'll be able to do that. And you Android subscribers, Samsung and Google and all the other Android phones who have been left out in the cold, you can now join the fold. So welcome. And Wendy, this has been a truly unusual show and a fun one, too. It has been, as usual, a pleasure.
I agree. It has been fun.
Let's do it again tomorrow, and hopefully that you will join us as well here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye now.